Good morning and welcome, everyone. We'll be getting started promptly at 10. Want to thank everyone for being here on time, and we'll be definitely getting into state legislator priorities with Peter Birdsall and Sarah Ortega, who are on the call with us today. Good morning once again, welcome. We're going to be starting shortly. All right. It is now 10 o'clock, so I wanted to make sure that we honored everyone's time and started. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on state legislators' priorities for California. Next slide for me, please. My name is Matt Miyashiro, and I am your Corwin Senior Professional Learning Advisor, and I support districts in California offering professional learning services. And we're excited to come in here and talk a little bit more about a little bit of our Zoom keeping. Next slide, please. So if you take a look at the bottom, we have our chat box. Please make sure that you interact. And if you have any questions for any participants or our panelists, please make sure that you select your question for all panelists and attendees. This webinar will be recorded, and we will be sharing the recording along with the slide decks as well within the next couple of days. And if you have any other questions about contacts, you can reach us at info@k12.corwin.com. So a couple quick reminders upcoming. We have some free webinars that we want you to make sure you register for. We have our critical comprehension on March 20th. On April 3rd, we have how to engage families. And finally, on May 8th, we have teaching methods for active learning. So please come join us at visitcorwin.com/webinars, and you can register there for free. So it is my honor to be able to welcome two special guests for today, Peter Birdsall and Sarah Ortega. Peter Birdsall is the Executive Director for Professional Learning Coalition. His experience in state education policy includes serving legislative advocates for numerous California school districts, county offices, and professional associations. And also we have today Sarah Ortega, who is one of our educational consultants, also is an elementary educator, Teacher of the Year last year in Chula Vista, California. And she works with organizations to design and implement learning solutions that support the emotional behavior and instructional needs of students. Sarah's energetic trainings guide the collective work of organizations to powerfully impact teaching and learning. And with further ado, we're going to let Peter get started. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Matt. As indicated, this webinar was scheduled to talk about state legislators' priorities. That works because the deadline to introduce new bills was in February. So we now have sort of the lay of the land in terms of what are the primary concerns of the state, both the governor because of the January budget submission and because of legislators, the bill deadline in February. We have a lay of the land in terms of what are the priorities for the coming year. Key point on this slide is my email address, because I'm going to mention several bills. This is the beginning of the process for legislation. They were introduced in February. The legislative session will run through September. So if at any point, either just you'd like more information about a bill, or if you are particularly concerned about a bill and you want to get engaged, please contact me in terms of advocacy. I'll be happy to share what information we have at that time. Next, please. I did want to start briefly with the budget. The budget, again, the timing on that one was introduced by the governor in January. In May, we will get what's called the May revision, which is the updated revenue and expenditure figures. And the legislature will work really rapidly in the following month to reach agreement with the governor and have a budget in place by July 1. So in terms of schedule, we're about halfway through the budget process. In terms of the key decisions, we're still early in the process. Legislators are still trying to hear what are the concerns, priorities at the local level. I'd say the main thing that's changed since January is the Legislative Analyst's Office, that's what LAO represents. Legislative Analyst's Office is reasonably, I don't want to say pessimistic, but they think the governor's budget is overly optimistic. That might be a better way to say it. And so they're predicting the Prop 98 guarantee will be $2 billion lower. That is not, I'm not saying that to scare people on the call. $2 billion in the context of the entire budget is not a huge amount. But what it does say is there is like no chance of a major new initiative in K-12 education. There may be a few small ones, but you will not be focusing this year on trying to implement a new initiative. It allows you, I think, in a really positive way to focus on implementation of the programs that are already on your plate. The other thing is it's not a doom and gloom budget. The K-12 education is scheduled to get over an 8% cost of living adjustment. So the cost the cost of living adjustment could be a little bit lower than they will see. That's what the debate will be about. But the key point is there won't be new initiatives in this budget, at least significant new initiatives, and the focus will appropriately be on implementation, which hopefully segues nicely into the next slide, which is the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program. This is arguably the biggest. I mean, there's also transitional kindergarten. There are other new initiatives, but this is arguably the biggest of the new initiatives, $4 billion a year. The Legislative Analyst's Office earlier had said that there might be some savings that could be accrued in this program, that districts were being funded even though they didn't have full participation. So there was discussion about will there be changes. It's pretty clear at this point, even though it's only March, that there will not be significant changes. The governor did not propose any changes. The governor is a strong supporter of the program. And then in the first Assembly Budget Subcommittee hearing on this, the chair of the committee took the really highly unusual step of advising the Legislative Analyst's Office to not look in this area for savings. He said, we're not interested in savings in this area. If anything, we want to expand it. So you have both the Assembly and the Senate and the governor, already clearly on record as saying they want to continue with full throttle with implementation of this program. So what that means for you at the local level, because I assume you've been working, planning, putting in place the pieces to implement this program, stay the course, keep going, and plan on 23-24 being the first full implementation year. So what full implementation means, again, this is expanded learning is transitional kindergarten through grade 6, and it requires that you offer for all what are unduplicated students, so called unduplicated students, so English learners, low income, foster youth, that they be offered a 9-hour day and additional 30-day non-school days. And the 9-hour day is a regular school day plus after school or before school. So it's a major expansion of after school opportunities for those students. Next slide, please. The new piece of the budget, when the governor released the budget in January, he said he would be coming forward with a comprehensive set of proposals in February. Those did come out in early February. It's further expansion of the LCAP, Local Control and Accountability Plan, by requiring a particular focus on schools identified as low performing and also requiring a mid-year update. And then also for districts that are identified as having problems, the county office is required to provide technical assistance. The governor is proposing they would provide technical assistance to those districts for 2 years on the sort of reasonable assumption that it's hard to turn everything around in 1 year. So those are the key changes. I would say that for the Professional Learning Coalition, our concern is, on the one hand, it makes sense to focus on the schools that are having the greatest challenges. But the problem is that the governor is just adding more stuff into the LCAP instead of prioritizing or streamlining or thinking about what might be removed. So We have explicitly recommended to the legislature that they direct the Department of Education to come back in January with proposals on how to reduce the LCAP by 50%, at least 50%. Because we've heard from a lot of people that the LCAP is just becoming really burdensome compliance document. So that seems to be generating some interest in the legislature and among other education groups. So you had my email address at the first slide. If you're interested in learning more about that effort, which again will be part of the budget process, so we'll know the answer by June 15th. But if you're interested in learning more about that, please send me an email. Next slide, please. So all of that was a quick run through on the budget. We've talked about the budget before. The newest part of this presentation today are the bills, because those were introduced, as I said, last month. There are over 2,700 new bills. There are over 200 of them are in K-12 education space. So obviously this is a small subset. This picked both because of, I think, the focus of these webinars and the work that you're doing in your school districts with Corwin, but also because these legislators, it's not your job really to track what legislators are key legislators, but each of the legislators carrying these bills are chairs of important committees within the legislature. So they are sort of by definition significant legislators who have a good chance of getting these bills go through to enactment. So the first three all revolve around what I would generally say is increasing student engagement and opportunities at the middle school and high school level. Expanded Learning Opportunity Program, as I mentioned, as you know, is TK through grade 6. I think there is a concern that there hasn't been enough attention focused to middle school and high school. So McCarty's bill, he's the chair of the budget subcommittee, would expand after school programs for middle and high school students. Murasuchi, he's the chair of the Assembly Education Committee. He would try and streamline and stabilize career technical education programs, which obviously a lot of research that supports student engagement through CTE. And then Assemblymember Holden is the chair of the Assembly Appropriations Committee, and he's trying to expand and support dual enrollment programs where high school students can take a course where they are simultaneously generating credit both at the high school and at the community college level. So each of those share the common denominator, if you will, quality of being focused on middle school and high school. And I think also reasonably we can say they're focused around broader opportunities, more student engagement at those grade levels. The other two don't fit so neatly, but I know from hearing a number of districts around the state, they are of general concern. The senator is Senator Portantino. He is the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. So again, significant legislator in the process. SB 98 would shift funding for California schools from average daily attendance to pupil enrollment, what they call average daily membership. We have a lot of conversations with schools that would love to have that change, because you staff based on enrollment, obviously, and especially with the experience of COVID and online learning and everything else, it would be much simpler to be working off of enrollment. So we put this in there because a lot of schools are rallying around it and you want to know about it. At the same time, I would say the chances of it being enacted this year are very slim. The governor is already on record as not supportive of that. But want to make sure you're aware of it. The bill that I think has a much better chance of going the distance is SB 691, which is dyslexia screening. It would be mandate the school districts screen for dyslexia sometime in the grade K through 2 age span. And this is part of a broader discussion that's going on about reading performance and reading programs and the role of systemic phonemic awareness, things like that. So that I think will be a high profile bill that fits squarely within the focus. These were the webinars, the work of Corwin on teaching and learning. So in any case, that's a very quick run through of those bills. The As I said, none of these bills have heard in their first committee yet. This is the beginning of the process. They will be heard in March. And if you are interested in more information, either about how to help support them or kill them, whichever you want to do, or just how they're doing, please contact me via the email address. With that, I want to transfer over to Sarah, because the key part of these webinars is how do you align with what the state's doing to support the students that you serve. And as I indicated, there's a real common theme, I think, in these legislative efforts around student engagement, social emotional learning. If you look at the Expand Learning Opportunities Program, that very explicitly says this is not just more of the instructional day, but it's to focus on student engagement, nutrition, social emotional learning. And then, as I indicated, there are at least 3 bills at the secondary and middle school level that also, I think, you could really tie back to strengthening student engagement opportunities. So, Sarah, given that this is sort of the landscape of where the state's going and what they're hoping the schools address, what do you think? What would you say school leaders should be thinking about as they try and figure out how they use all this to address the social emotional needs of students and engage them more actively in their education? So, thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate the connection that you made it to student engagement. And there is a couple important considerations for districts, I think, here. First, I know that, many teachers, myself included, have experienced some struggles sometimes with student engagement, or just, at the very least, just wondering how we can get our students to take more ownership over their learning. And so I think often we lean on some incentives or gimmicks that might work, in the short term. But, if you think about the way that we approach our work on academic learning, right, in the classroom, we lay out a learning progression for students. We understand the importance of teaching content and academic language for acquiring these academic skills. And so we teach that work so explicitly and so with so much intention. But when it comes to student engagement, sometimes we leave it up to the student to kind of figure out what, engagement means, when the work that we do around academics is so intentional. And so I think that we can take that same type of systematic approach to teaching students and setting up, so we can set up these opportunities for students to learn how it is that they drive their own learning, right? Because the bottom line here is that student engagement is what we want to see, but we have to set up experiences where students learn how to drive their own learning. So I really do appreciate that connection to student engagement and the work that we do to explicitly teach that. And then I was also thinking that going back to the extended learning, right, there's some important considerations for districts there as well. Even in that after school time, our goal still remains that we are supporting the social, emotional, and the academic lives of our students. And we can really use that expanded learning opportunities program to provide a very different experience from the typical school day, but one that really still supports and enriches the classroom experience too. And so one important consideration would be the impact that background knowledge has on a student's ability to read, right? When we read, we're drawing on our factual knowledge, but also our own personal lived experiences. And so we could use that expanded learning opportunities program to really be deliberate and intentional in building background knowledge for our students. So we can use that program to have some hands-on science experiments, some study trips, some developmentally appropriate engineering projects, really to build those sensory experiences for students so that they can, touch and feel and smell and listen and talk about what we're learning about in school. And so when students have that background knowledge that we build from them around a topic, or they have some connected experiences, then that's going to impact the work that they do in the classroom. So really, we can take advantage of that time to be able to enrich our classroom experience in that after school time as well.
And Sarah, I know now you're at the high school level. So after school programs, I sort of think, interesting enough, when Schwarzenegger first got that passed, it was focused on the middle school and the high school level. And now it's really shifted to the elementary level. I don't know if you had a chance to think about opportunities for after school, for middle school and high school, and how they really, it's how you address really the unique, demands being put on those students, especially in terms of the concern about mental health and social emotional learning. Because
No,
I think that bill's got a good chance of going the distance. So that's why I'm trying to prime the pump for 23-24.
No, and I appreciate that, because I think that districts can take a couple things into consideration, right? They can look at how to provide that before school, after school, summer school time to kind of enrich the classroom experience. But then we also have an opportunity to teach students some strategies for self-regulation and some work around social and emotional learning as well. We know that the work that we do around there ends up supporting academic and classroom achievement as well. And so I think districts really need to consider using that before school, after school, and summer school experience to support the social emotional well-being of our students, especially in the middle school and high school levels.
So I probably should have said this during my presentation. I'm sorry, but for anybody that is interested in that bill, my McCarty, because I already said there's no money. The reason I think it may make it is what he's proposing is to take part of the after school, take more of the after school initiative money that Schwarzenegger got passed by the voters, and also the federal 21st century, and shift more of that money to the middle school and secondary level, because obviously there's a significant amount of expanded learning opportunity money in the elementary grades. So it could be shifting resources, not adding resources. So, but it would mean is that assuming that gets passed, then school districts can be in a position to apply for that money in 23-24. So, March is not too early to start thinking about how would you design those kind of middle school after school programs. So.
Right. And I think you mentioned earlier a little bit on the connection to CTE work. And I think for middle school and high school students, that relevancy piece of seeing how their academic learning in the classroom is connected to what they're going to do, what the kind of role or job that they're looking for, career that they're looking for forward to in the future. And I think we could use some of that time to also help them explore those options as well.
At the risk of giving the people on this call more work to do. I mentioned the bill on dual enrollment. The legislature, both the legislature and the governor are very supportive of dual enrollment. A lot of those programs are in fact career technical education. And so the department just released the request for applications for $100 million in grants for dual enrollment programs. So if you didn't see that and you're interested in that, Sarah, I think your high school actually has some dual enrollment programs in place. So I don't know if you want to talk about those, but it's up to $100,000 per high school. So if that piques your interest, please send me an email or contact Matt, and he can get to me, and I'll get you the information.
Yeah, those dual enrollment programs, can I tell you that the motivation that you see for students to be able to see that they are completing some coursework for college, and just the kind of the confidence that it builds in them. And so I think that is absolutely a great homework assignment to give some of the attendees in the room.
Matt, unless there are additional questions, I don't have more to talk about these bills. I will, later in the session, but not in March.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Sarah. As I was looking through the chat, there are no questions at this point in time. There was one asking about using AI and Zoom to kind of record meeting notes. But other than that, in terms of wanted to give everyone some wait time, because obviously we have talked about a lot. And so if you have any questions, I just wanted to give you a moment to kind of think about what you may want to ask Peter or Sarah today about what you've heard. And of course, if it doesn't come to you right away, you can always reach out to me, you can reach out to Peter, and I can always get that information passed along to get those answers handled in an appropriate way and time. Next slide while we wait, and I'll check back at the chat. So before, I wanted to make sure that we also take a look now at some of those upcoming Corwin Institutes. So if you're kind of starting to get a think about getting a jump into 2023, I want you to take a look at some of our upcoming events with some of our wonderful thought leaders and top experts in the fields to begin thinking about how you want to train your team of educators. And so we have on March 14th, the Virtual Social and Emotional Learning Now Institute with Doug Fisher, Nancy Fry, and Jonathan Walker. On April 12th, we have our Virtual Early Childhood Education Institute with John Almerod and Kateri Thunder. And finally, on May 19th, we have Restorative Practices for Practicing Caring Classroom Discipline Institute, and that's with Nancy Fry and Dominique Smith. And so as you begin to think about some of those learnings, those are some of the ways you can start to get a jump start, and you can register at www.corwin.com/institutes and begin to think about that planning. But I did want to jump back into the questions because I did see one question come through, and this came from, let's see, Babette. When you discuss shifting money, do you think that will reduce what districts have now?
In some larger sense or more general sense, the answer is yes. The two programs I mentioned, 21st Century, which is federal funding, and the After School Education Safety Program, ACES, are both grant programs that districts apply for. So if in that application process, if now 20% of that money was earmarked for middle and high school, then that would mean that obviously a smaller amount of money was earmarked for elementary. I think I know the thinking of Assemblymember McCarty and his staff is that with $4 billion in state funding in the elementary grade space, that there's enough money to support that. And so what you're doing is making more available at middle school and high school level. I think in general, the feeling is that not all of the $4 billion is now being used to provide those services. So to elementary students. So certainly if you were applying for it and you were at the elementary level and now there's less available, then in that specific circumstance, it might be less. But I think the general feeling is that with the significant infusion of state aid, that it should not impact students or services at the elementary level. But obviously that could be a concern that people want to raise as the bill moves through the process.
Thank you, Peter. And then hopefully, Babette, that answers your question. If not, just write into the chat and we can expand on it. There's another question from Terry. Can someone expand on AB 377, consolidate K-12 strong workforce programs into CTIG?
I can expand on that in great length. There's the federal Perkins program. In terms of state funding, there are two competitive grant programs operated by the state for career technical education. One is called K-12 Strong Workforce, which is administered by the community college system, but serves K-12 education and funds K-12 education. And then CTIG, which is this California, the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant Program, which is also a competitive grant program that's administered but this one's administered by the Department of Education. So you have two parallel grant programs, $150 million in K-12 Strong Workforce, $300 million in CTE, but they are two different application procedures, two different administrative agencies, two different reporting requirements, different deadlines. I just hear from a lot of districts around the state that it drives them crazy to basically have to duplicate this process under two different systems. So the proposal would be to consolidate all $450 million. So it's not an increase or a cut. It's a consolidation running through the Department of Education, in part because that is larger of the two programs, but also because school districts normally work with the Department of Education, not with the Chancellor's Office of Community Colleges. So that bill, went through the Assembly last year, 76-0, and then got caught up in a little fight between the houses. So I think it's going to get serious consideration this year if you're in the CTE space, to try and consolidate those two programs.
Thank you, Peter. At this point, I hope that answered your question, Terry. And if it does, just let me know if you want to expand any more. In the meantime, if we don't have any more questions, we can move to the next slide, please. So this is for me. This is just getting to know a little bit more about me. My name is once again Matt Miyashiro, and I'm helping with supporting districts with as your senior professional learning advisor, creating custom professional learning plans, whether they're in person or virtual, to support your school site or district. And so it's important to just kind of hear where you're at. And then if you have questions about the type of learning plans you're looking for, just reach out to me. My email and my phone number are there, and I'd be happy to get you started thinking about what kind of learning plans you'd like to start with your teams. Next slide. And so as we begin to think about everything, I wanted to first just say thank you. Thank you to our attendees. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you for attending our webinar. And so we wanted to make sure that you can get an opportunity to enjoy 30% off plus free shipping for our books for any of our titles, including these new titles from Corwin. So we have our teaching reading, our vocabulary playbook, and this is balanced literacy. And so you can go into our Corwin website and then use our webinar code, webinars23, and you can access these books at that discounted price. So once again, thank you to Peter Birdsall and Sarah Ortega for joining us today. And everyone else, we really hope you enjoyed our webinar. Please reach out if you have any questions about any professional learning services you'd like to get started at your school. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Matt.